Lots at stake. Go 1-0. Win number 6. Bowl eligible.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
As the lady said, your Huskers every day. I'm DP. This is Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch each and every single day, and we'll take you through November as we get this party started. It's a Sparty party, and as we talk about that, we'll get into the details of what it means. But first, Mark Einweiler, if you would please, let them know about Gametime.
Thank you, DP. This episode of Locked On Huskers is brought to you by Gametime. Guys, buying tickets to events should be easy. Instead, it turns into a frustrating, time-consuming, expensive process. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and live theater events near you. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. They give you all-in prices to show your total up front so you know you're getting a great deal without any hidden fees. And you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, altogether one word, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. DP, back to you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, the hype train is coming. Kool-Aid is pouring in the room. We appreciate you for making Locked On a part of your day. Greatly appreciated for you every day as they get the content and always respond and put good thoughts out there. Greatly appreciated. A big weekend for the Huskers. When it comes to the football side of things, one, you get a new schedule, so you have some idea about what's coming. But the entire focus is to go 1-0. Just go 1-0. That's literally how focused this can be because it allows you to forward think, look at progress, consider development, and then reevaluate your standing, your brand, and your image, your place in the game, your place in the Big Ten. And listen, as you sit currently, as the Huskers currently sit in a 4-way tie for first place in the Big Ten West, the responsibility gets louder. The conversation becomes different. But the value of all of this is that this coaching staff, Matt Rhule and this coaching staff, has figured out how to retain focus, to recenter this team, to redirect this team, and then to get them to isolate on mission 1, task 1 in full, which is beat Michigan State. Listen, East Lansing has its own vibe, and it has its own stuff going on. Nebraska has to tune out all of the peripheral stuff that's happening in Spartyville. They've got to focus. Listen, you can have understanding for what Michigan State is going through, but there needs to be focus on what this means to Nebraska, what it means to the fan base, what it means to the university, what it means to the city and the town and the space, what it means to the players, what it means to the coaching staff. It validates so many things and allows people to actually take a deep, go big red breath in and to exhale by saying that we are once again valid. We have value, we matter, and we get the additional time that comes from being successful in a college football season. The extra weeks, the extra days, the extra reps, the extra conversation. Listen, we have, as long as Locked On Huskers has been around, there has not been a bowl game for Locked On Huskers to cover. So it's a big deal to go 1-0, and there are a lot of things in play that will determine what that is. But amongst them, at the very top of this thing, is that there's a reminder that Nebraska, while they have an opponent, the real issue and the real thing that has to be measured is what Nebraska is to Nebraska. What Nebraska holding itself accountable and responsible for the things that are required to win a Big Ten football game. And again, I can't say it enough that there is a meaningful football game, a meaningful Big Ten football game that involves the Nebraska Huskers in November that could make them bowl eligible. I don't have to hype it too much because Husker fans, the last time those words were uttered and true was a while ago. It's been a while. So, yes, priority and focus should be the thing for each person to do their job, for each person to know their job, to be accountable for it, to be accountable for the person lining up next to them, for the coaches to communicate in full, and no matter what distraction and obstacles take place, that you focus and refocus on one play at a time, play by play. Nebraska doing the things that it knows how to do, and then doing them in such high repetition and such high volume that Michigan State can't match. Now, the numbers will tell you that these are comparable teams. They're not that dissimilar in the numbers. It's in the result where they differ. And listen, coming in at 5-3, Michigan State has to know that Nebraska is playing forward. They're playing forward. This thing has meaning and value. And on the other side, Nebraska has to recognize that Michigan State still feels like it can turn its season around. With 2 wins on the book, that, if they get on a roll, if they can beat Nebraska and sit at 3 wins, then you can target forward and say, listen, we've learned our lessons and we can still become bowl eligible ourselves. The schedule is the schedule. And what it tells you about Michigan State is that it's had its struggle. And a lot of that is off the field. Now, I want to get into some of what's happened. And again, the transition from it being a Mel Tucker team to being a Harlan Barnett team. And Barnett's results haven't been what he would be happy with, nor his players. And because of that, you then have to hold together an entire team, dare say an entire program, by green and red shoestrings. This is a program and a team that won its first 2 games. It beat Central Michigan 31-7. It beat Richmond 45-14. And then the wheels fell off. The wheels fell off. The steering wheel broke. The GPS shut down. And you're still trying to find your way. And they've had to battle through. And let me tell you that it wasn't a Sparty friendly schedule. Because even at 2-0, they had to play Washington. And that wasn't pretty. That was a 41-7 beatdown. There were a lot of holes that were not only generated, but then recognized as consistent. Then they lose to Maryland 31-9. They battle and brawl with Iowa in back-to-back games where there was the competitive fire of Michigan State still existed and showed up. Right? A 26-16 loss to Iowa and then a 27-24 loss to Rutgers, at Rutgers. Both of those games on the road, at Iowa, at Rutgers. And then a 49-0 loss to a Michigan team that is in the news. And that's your rival. And it didn't go well. 49-0 not putting it together, then a chance to bounce back, but sitting at the top of the Big Ten West, along with Nebraska and 2 other teams, is Minnesota. And the Spartans traveled to Minnesota. They were competitive. It looked like they were going to be physical and fight. And then they ended up losing 27 to 12. Not exactly the season Michigan State had in mind. We'll put a pin there and pause and come back and look at Nebraska's schedule and what they've done. A 6-game losing streak for the Spartans, but now the Huskers are on a roll. We'll talk about that when we come back to Locked On Huskers. Welcome back, Gang. DP here, Locked On Huskers. And before we get into the schedule that has been for Nebraska and that sets them up at 5-3 heading into East Lansing to take on the Spartans, Mark Onweiler, would you please let them know about PrizePicks?
Thank you, DP. This episode of Locked On Huskers is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. You just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch your winnings come rolling in. And with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. That's a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you can pick LeBron James and Travis Kelce at a 2.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus receptions. Want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill or comedian Andrew Schultz? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. So go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. DP, back to you.
Thank you, sir. Lots to talk about here. And again, for everybody that's involved, Nebraska recognizes that with a new coach and then a new coach within the new coach, with players in the transfer portal, starters leaving, and then the collapse of the season, and then more players jumping into the transfer portal, Nebraska has gone through its own turmoil, its own consequence and circumstance, and quite frankly, to find a young quarterback who can do enough to lead this team to 5 wins and 6 starts. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all to come in and have the entire season on your shoulders. And you're just winning the starting job, and then you're learning your own way and your own path. And here they are trying to figure out, wait a minute, is this the guy? And then along the way, Nebraska determined a thing, that they were a defense-first team. They were exceptional at it. Top of the conference, good. And that's saying a lot. But when to find out, and they tell you in the Big Ten, anybody that's connected to Big Ten historically or on the media side, information side, that the 2 things that you have to have going for you to have success in full in the Big Ten Conference is rush offense and rushing defense. And there's no coincidence that Nebraska sits at 5-3 with an equal opportunity to win the Big Ten West and play in Indianapolis in a few months, because this Nebraska team is first in rushing offense in the Big Ten Conference. Now that number should make you scratch your head, but 190 yards per game, and a large fraction of that, a large portion of that, a large mover in that number is Heinrich Haarberg and his ability to pull the ball down. And even with Jeff Sims, Nebraska still felt like running quarterback was going to be the way for it to be productive, move the chains, and cause some other things to happen offensively. And Heinrich Haarberg has honored those things. He's been consistent in those things. And if you're going to talk about how to win a meaningful road game in November in the Big Ten Conference, running the football is paramount. It's at the top of the list. And there's several things that you need to pay attention to, but paying attention to Nebraska's ability to run the football and be consistent with it. Now, there are bumps and bruises that happen when your quarterback becomes a viable and vital part of your run game. But Nebraska has prepared itself for that. And they've had success in averaging 190 yards a game rushing. That's in the top 25 in the country. While Sparty has a solid run game, it's not on the level of Nebraska. And through that, on the other side of the ball, that Nebraska, and the number still startles me, but Nebraska is 5th in the country in rush defense. Number 5, there are 4 programs in all of the country that are better at stopping the run than Nebraska is. And there's several keys to this. And again, a 3-3-5 defense with talented players and depth of roster. The depth chart shows up on game day, which is nothing. It's one thing to say you have depth. The other thing is when that depth shows up in the numbers and in the production. And Nebraska's defensive depth shows up in the stats, because to be number 2 in the Big Ten against the run and number 5 in the country, this is a rushing conference. If you can't run the ball, it's very tough to be successful. And if you can't stop the run, it's very difficult to be successful. Nebraska is number 1 in rush offense and number 2 in rushing defense. Those numbers matter. Those numbers are important. Those numbers speak to consistency and volume. And yeah, you can match up and say, okay, Michigan had their way. But the average accumulates as it accumulates, and this is the number 2 defense in the Big Ten Conference. When you look at Michigan State offensively and say, okay, how are they going to measure up? Well, they're 13th in rush offense. If they're gonna butter their bread tomorrow against Nebraska, running the ball, if they are having that kind of success, they average 108 yards a game. Nebraska averages giving up 79. It's important. And then the rush offense, Nebraska being number 1 in what they do with it. Michigan State is 9th in the Big Ten Conference, in the top 45 in the country in rushing defense at 126 yards a game. So you can meet somewhere in the middle and determine what your level of success is going to look like for Nebraska. But running the football is going to be big on the road in the Big Ten Conference. That's just how it works. That's what it's always been. On the passing side, both teams have some things to work on. This will not be the most productive passing day in the Big Ten Conference. You're not going to see 600 yards passing. That's not where this is going to be. But the numbers do allow for there to be some success. And both teams will have to figure out, you know what? On our level to commit, the team that's ahead, I pretty much imagine they're just going to fatten their neck, get strong in the back, and figure out how they're going to continue to keep the other team's offense off the field. But there's a whole lot more to this. And Nebraska's young receivers and its new offensive line will have an impact on this game, along with the special teams. We'll cover those 2 things when we come back to Locked On Huskers. Hey, gang, final segment of this episode of the Sparty Party with Locked On Huskers. And listen, some of the things that are in play are obvious. Run game, what's going to happen, how you defend the run. But here's the thing that's in play. That penalties will play. The team that is – these are 2 teams that get penalized a lot, even on Big Ten standards and on national standards. These are teams that get penalized a lot. Nebraska has an opportunity to kind of curve themselves from bad behavior. And sometimes chaos causes penalties. So it is where you're seeing something that you haven't seen, or you're feeling something that you haven't seen. Sometimes you're chasing ghosts, and sometimes, quite frankly, leaning against the wall, you feel like you're losing ground, so you will do whatever you can to maintain your space. But if Nebraska can keep their penalties down, now Nebraska averages just under 6 a game. It's asking a lot. It's asking a lot to not have 5 penalties in the game. But it is asking for Nebraska to do basic things well. That 5.9 a game is in the bottom half of the Big Ten. And that scares me. But the other side of it is that Michigan averages almost 7.5 penalties a game. And that's worst in the Big Ten Conference and at 120 in the country. So all of that matters. And then special teams will matter. But then the thing that jumps out at me is that Nebraska is way too good at turning the football over. They have been way too good. This is an opportunity. Take care of the ball in a good weather game in East Lansing, Michigan. You know, the turnovers lost, Nebraska's pretty bad. But here's the thing. Husker fans, exhale. The turnover battle is winnable. Here's why. Nebraska has 19 turnovers lost this season. That is 13th in the Big Ten Conference and 125th in the country. Michigan State also has 19 turnovers and is 13th in the Big Ten Conference and 125th in the country. The turnover margin leans toward Michigan State, though. 1 per game, just a little bit better in the turnover margin. Nebraska's last. Michigan State is 13th. Penalties and turnovers will play its usual huge part in determining the outcome of this game. I feel this way about it in closing, and I want to set the table for it. Nebraska's ability to run and stop the run, you can control not putting the ball on the ground. Ball security, getting the ball in your hand, handed to you, literally handed to you, or handing it to somebody rather than throwing it, should reduce the risk. And if Nebraska is having run game success, one, that means staying on the field, that means first downs and moving the chains, that means time of possession, and that means not putting the ball on the turf in East Lansing. Nebraska is a gang tackle and run-through type of defense. They will have turnover opportunities against Michigan State. My hope, my dream, my wish, that Nebraska has a clean game, fewer penalties than Michigan State, win the time of possession, and then, listen, don't turn the ball over. Those 3 things on the billboard, along with a big circle of going 1-0. And then, after you do all the things required for you to go 1-0, then and only then should the Huskers look forward and up. Do your job. Be sound. Be simple. But be effective. The Huskers can go 1-0 against Michigan State, and then we can throw confetti and have some different discussions about Nebraska football. I'm DP. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Listen, let's start the music and then we'll close it with the 3 words we love so much. Go Big Red.